The following presentation is made possible by a grant from the Southwood County Historical Corporation, 543rd Street South, Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin.
Paul Gross here. Welcome to the continuing documentary series, A History of Wisconsin Rapids. In speaking of the 20th century, Walter Cronkite once observed that following World War II, most major events would be referred to as before the war and after the war. With that in mind, I've chosen the title of this film to be After the War, Part 1. As in previous films, I'll take you to many of today's familiar locations and dissolve back in time to the way we were not that many years ago. So here we are. It's 1998 and our camera is located on East Grand Avenue, exactly where I stood with my 16mm Bell & Howell movie camera 52 years ago this very day, July 4th, 1946. This was the 4th that followed the war, and this was the parade that said thank you to the hundreds of area men and women who served in the armed forces that crushed the Axis war machines of Nazi Germany, Italy, and Japan. Victory was sweet, and so was the homecoming, for now we could get on with our lives. Newspaper headlines read, Rosie abandons her rivets to raise babies, an obvious reference to Rosie the Riveter, symbol of women that replaced men in our factories during the war. At the time, only one bridge joined the east and west side of the river, the beautiful old Grand Avenue Bridge. At the same time, just following the Great War, this area on the south side of West Grand Avenue was still referred to as the Nash Block. The Nash brothers once owned a large hardware store at this location. In 1946, the previously remodeled building was home to the Montgomery Ward store. A portion of the second floor was the original location of radio station WFHR. At the time, the Wisconsin Rapids Daily Tribune was located in a small building on First Avenue just behind the Montgomery Ward store. The newspaper and the radio station were both owned and operated by William F. Huffman. The radio station was affiliated with the Mutual Broadcasting System. Also after the war, on the southwest corner of First Avenue and Johnson Street, stood the old commercial hotel. The building had seen better days, and there was some interest in restoring the structure. But when all efforts failed, the building and land were sold to the Huffman family. In 1958, the hotel was demolished, and the present Daily Tribune building was built on the site. The radio station, now broadcasting in both AM and FM, occupied the round portion of the first floor. In the early 80s, the Huffman family sold the entire operation, the newspaper to Thompson Newspapers, the radio station to the Janesville Gazette. Going back to our location on First and Grand Avenues, we return this time to a 1965 view which shows that Emmons Office Supply now occupied what had been the old Tribune building. Just to the left of Emmons, buildings that were previously home to Normington Cleaners and the Wisconsin Valley Creamery were now occupied by a beauty shop and a gift shop, and an enlarged Normington's now occupied the Creamery building. As our camera swings to the right, this is how the south side of West Grand Avenue appeared in 1965, when the beautiful Wisconsin Theater was the centerpiece of the area. The theater was actually an L-shaped building, and here on 2nd Avenue we see the stage end of the 900-seat auditorium. Now, starting at the corner was the Empire Lounge, Household Finance, Arts Restaurant, Karen's Confectionery, the Wisconsin Theater, the Mecca Tavern, a tiny jewelry shop, the Quick Lunch Restaurant, Badger Paint Store, and Church's Drug Store. Beyond Church's in the next block was the First National Bank, Wilcox Ready to Wear, Daily Music and Appliance, and a Standard Oil gas station. Returning to the 1st and Grand Avenue intersection, our camera is facing north and the CPI office building. Construction of this building started in the fall of 1980, and the building was ready for occupancy early in 1982. The area shown here was once called the River Block, and this is how the River Block appeared in the late 40s and early 50s. Just to the right of the building is 1st Avenue North, a street that was abandoned when the CPI office building was constructed. The first building on the corner was the Heilman store, which mostly featured ladies' ready-to-wear. The next one was Gurman's Jewelry, a shoe store, Fay Photo Shop, a gift and luggage store, and an auto supply. And on the west end of the building was a branch of the old T.B. Scott Library. In the next block, the still familiar Meade Witter building was home to many successful businesses. Among the best remembered were Fritz and Pete's Pool Hall, Wilpolt's Restaurant, Hafner the Barber, Rapids Bakery and Western Union, Frank Abel's Men's Shop, Whitrock's Drugs, Livingston's, Demro's Gift Shop, Newton's, and F.W. Woolworth. There was a man who became a national hero of sorts during the war because of his company's ability to fabricate ships and weapons in record time. His name was Henry J. Kaiser. After the war, riding on his reputation, he teamed up with a man named Fraser to build Kaiser and Fraser automobiles and a smaller vehicle called the Henry J. At the time, competition wasn't very tough, and it would not be until 1950 that the auto industry finally caught up with demand. In fact, this was the daring new 1946 Studebaker, followed by the 1946 DeSoto. Both Studebaker and DeSoto have long since gone out of business. Now a whole new product was entering the marketplace. It was the dawn of television. In 1950, there were 3.8 million TVs in service, representing 9% of all households in the United States, and the number was growing rapidly. Locally, a few of us strained to receive a picture from the nearest stations in Milwaukee and Minneapolis. Local reception was dubbed terrible vision by most folks. Finally, in December of 1953, Green Bay Channel 2 went on the air, and local television sales took off. These are some of the ads for the new TV wonders that appeared in the Daily Tribune. Ironically, of all these 1953 dealers, only Staub Electric is still in business, and they no longer sell TVs. At the time, TV advertising was very basic, and going back to our aforementioned Kaiser and Fraser, this is how they presented their 1951 models to the TV audience.
And there is your car, the 1951 Kaiser. Yes, the Kaiser offers you the most wonderful future because it has the most wonderful features. New features that will stay new for years to come. No other car gives you features like Kaiser's years ahead visibility. Kaiser gives you the greatest window area of any six-passenger car. Huge windows that give you control tower visibility. This tremendous windshield, for instance, is 1/3 larger than the average windshield. And here's another years ahead feature, this safety padded instrument panel. Yes, inside and out, feature for feature, the 51 Kaiser is the newest thing on wheels. The long, low look of the anatomic silhouette, the lightning power of the new supersonic engine, the rugged endurance of the exclusive anatomic frame construction make the Kaiser the car with the world's finest features and the world's finest future.
The company eventually failed and moved to South America, where they continued to build cars for a time.
1951 Kaiser. So stop in at your Kaiser Fraser dealer.
Later in the 50s, TV started to grow up. The Bulova Watch Company was proud sponsor of a #1 weekly program, The Jackie Gleason Show.
I hope you've seen my new show. It's on every Saturday night with the finest dancing and the most beautiful girls on television. We're also featuring the greatest watches in the world on our show, too. They're all created by Bulova, and they're really something. So tune in, won't you?
Right, Jackie. And friends, here's a preview of one Bulova watch you'll be seeing on the Jackie Gleason Show. It's the handsome new Bulova President, the watch with the executive look. New miracle of thin watch design, handsome classic numerals, distinctive modern dial. Shock resistant with the famous Bulova Lifetime unbreakable mainspring. And priced incredibly low. From only $49.50, easy credit too, as little as $1 down, buys the Bulova President.
Oh, it's a dandy. See it right away at this store.
In spite of our fascination with the movies and TV, they had little or no impact on the local sports scene. The year was 1965, and this is a night view of the Hotel Dixon Brig. The Brig was a pleasant downstairs cocktail lounge and restaurant in the Dixon Hotel, located on the northeast corner of 4th and West Grand Avenues. The Dixon Brig had an excellent atmosphere and a reputation for good food and drink. The Brig also had its own basketball team, the Brig Bombers, managed by the Brig owner, a guy named Spider Bain. On February 23, 1956, the Brig Bombers challenged the world champion Minnesota Lakers, now the Los Angeles Lakers, to a basketball game at the Lincoln Fieldhouse. Here the Bombers are wearing the light tops, the Lakers the dark. The numbers add up to a final score of Lakers 80, Bombers 70. Obviously, the Bombers bombed. The following year, 1957, Chrysler introduced cars with fins, and the styling immediately caught on with the public and the rest of the industry. This rakish hardtop was the 1958 Plymouth Fury, with push-button shift, torsion bar suspension, and of course, a V8 engine. It was also in 1957 when Bernard Ziegler was head of the local Chamber of Commerce and the very first Ridiculous Days was introduced. I recall how Johnson Hills found old dresses in the attic, as it were, and sold them for 35 cents each. At the time, Johnson Hills was truly a department store, featuring everything from groceries and meats to furniture and appliances, and even a restaurant. In fact, at one time, they even sold farm machinery. This first Ridiculous Days was indeed the best one, when merchants were concentrated in the downtown area and truly used the event to clear out their white elephants. Even the boss got involved. Here, Chester Bell, in bib overalls with a corncob pipe, joins in the fun. Retail business was more relaxed in the 50s. Walmart and Kmart type stores had not yet appeared on the horizon, and very few retailers were opened on Sunday. Here's Johnson Hill employee Ed Brado interviews a customer in front of the store. Employees were more like family in the 50s, and now and then had time for little hijinks, as we see here. Emil Beck, Johnson Hill's tailor, plays the mandolin, while some of the female employees put on an act. Emil's tailor shop was located on the balcony, and here Ed Brado of the men's department sends some trousers up to the balcony by air, where Emil did the alternations. The balcony was also the location of the Johnson Hill restaurant, which featured real home cooking. As we see here, it was a great gathering place for employees in the early morning before the store opened for business at 9 a.m. And now we move one block south from the Johnson Hill location to the intersection of 3rd Avenue and Johnson Street. We are facing southwest as we go back in time. The year was 1965, when a much different scene was recorded by our camera. The large building on the left of the screen was home to the Marling Lumber Company. At the time, several residences were also located in the area, one of which included a barber shop. The first storefront coming into view was the location of Coleman's Radio Repair Shop. A bakery occupied the corner building, and just behind the bakery on Johnson Street was a tire repair and recapping business. As we do an about face, our camera facing north again takes us back. This 1965 view shows a corner gas station. Just behind the gas station in this view was the Sears store, which was actually located in the former Palace Theater building. At the time, the theater marquee was still in place. As the camera pans right, a local grocery store known as King Henry's Trading Post and the Square Bar come into view. And now let's return to West Grand Avenue, where we are located at the 4th Avenue intersection, once again facing southwest. This time we go back to the summer of 1973, when a gas station dominated the area. It was a time when few could have imagined that gas would one day sell for more than $1 a gallon. Just to the right of the gas station was the City Hall. This location remained virtually unchanged until in 1980, when everything in the area was demolished to make room for a new Rapids Mall. Further to the right of the City Hall was the old Soo Line passenger depot. A sign on the north end of the building reads Wisconsin Rapids, but on the south end of the depot, a Grand Rapids sign, cut in stone, identifies our community, an obvious remnant of a period when railroads dominated local passenger travel. Perhaps you've noticed that at the time Grand Avenue was straight and did not curve north as it does today. There were still more buildings further along this downtown area of West Grand Avenue in 1973. The first building on the left was Red's Dixie Bar. Next was a surplus store, followed by a bar and restaurant. Next was the location of Doc Weller's jewelry store. At this point, Grand Avenue turns further west and was positioned just as it is today. This view shows Miller TV, another bar, and the Kellogg Lumber Company on the left, while on the right side of the picture, the present Metcalf Lumber Building comes into view. From there, we return to the intersection of West Grand and 4th Avenues. Facing northeast in this 1998 view, the brick building shown here is the Wallach Office Supply Building, which has remained virtually unchanged over the years. As we pan left to the City Hall parking lot, we take you back to a time when the Dixon Hotel stood on this property. In this May 1977 photo, demolition of the hotel was already in progress. Moving in closer, a sign on the building still identifies the location of the previously mentioned Rig Restaurant and Cocktail Lounge. In this view, the brown building, which was located behind the Dixon, is still often referred to as the Betke Building, where Betke Chevrolet had been located for many years. Now, facing northwest, we go back to the year 1973. Blinker's TV occupied the corner building, which for many years had been the location of Gottschalk's Grocery. Next was the Guarantee Hardware Store, which folks always claimed carried anything you needed and more. Following the hardware store was a tavern, and the next building was home to the Wisconsin Rapids Gas Company. Just to the left of the gas company building and slightly behind it out of sight was the Northwestern Passenger Depot. The brick building shown here was the Bandline Hotel, which was more of a boarding house. Next to the hotel was Romansky's Bar, and a building further to the left was the Brown Derby Lounge, which for a time featured live entertainment. 300 or 400 feet to the left of the Brown Derby was the location of the Milwaukee Road Depot, shown here in July of 1973, when demolition of the building was already in progress. This was a location that once played host to numerous daily trains and their passengers. This photo was taken on November 30th, 1969 by Bill O'Gara on the Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend as passengers waited for the 2:30 train that would take them to New Lisbon, where they would board one of the mainline Hiawatha's for destinations in Milwaukee, Chicago, and Minneapolis. One of these early giant Hiawatha steam locomotives is depicted in this Russ Porter painting as it thunders along the Mississippi. These trains were among the fastest in the nation and routinely exceeded speeds of over 100 miles an hour. It was on October 7th of 1970 when the final train left the local station, marking the end of all passenger rail service in central Wisconsin. By the fall of 1977, most of what we've seen from 4th Avenue and west had been demolished. In the area of Gutchalk's Grocery and the Guarantee Hardware buildings, a new city hall was taking shape, while just across the street, where the Sioux Line Depot and other buildings once stood, some of the foundations were already in place for the new Rapids Mall. This was to be one of the first true malls in the area, and for a time attracted an unusual number of customers from Stevens Point and Wausau. So, while all of this was going on following the Great War, Consolidated Papers was making great strides in the paper industry. One of the first big projects following the war was the construction of the Peton Well Dam, which would create a fine recreational area and help to ensure future power needs for the company. But perhaps the most significant project for Consolidated Papers began in 1967 with the construction of the new Kraft Mill. At the time of this major undertaking, few could have imagined the tremendous growth that was to follow and carry a dominant Consolidated Papers into the 21st century. So that's the way it was following World War II and right up to our not-too-distant past. There's much more to be said, much more to be seen, but we'll save those stories for next time, when we'll be dealing with the east side of the river. I'm Paul Gross. Thanks for listening.
Having seen this program, would you like to invest in your heritage? For just $5 a year, you're invited to become a member of the Southwood County Historical Corporation. Your contribution assures continuing research and preservation of our past. When was the last time you invested in your heritage? Why not do it today with just one easy call to 423-1580? Better yet, stop in for a visit and discover our award-winning exhibits and massive collection of what you never knew about your community and the central Wisconsin area. The following presentation is made possible by a grant from the Southwood County Historical Corporation, 543rd Street South, Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin.
Paul Gross here. Welcome once again to our continuing series, A History of Wisconsin Rapids. After the War, Part 2, The East Side. wrote a book which he called The Greatest Generation. The title refers to a generation of men and women who, after experiencing the Great Depression years, went off to war or to work in the factories that kept the military machine supplied with what it takes to win such a conflict. When it was all over, each of us would know of not just one, but several, who were close to us in one way or another and did not return. Personally, I recall my very good friend and neighbor, Wallace Schutz, a fine young man who, after graduating from high school, went to work as a bookkeeper for the Marling Lumber Company before he signed up. Wally's marker is in a local cemetery. Wallace Schutz, aviation machinist mate, second class, killed in action over truck, 4/29/44, buried at sea. And then there was my cousin George Matthews, Lieutenant George Matthews, killed in France, a short life of only 25 years. And yet another who never returned, Gordon Galloway. Gordy graduated with me in the Lincoln class of 1941. In fact, Gordy and I worked together for Consolidated Papers in the Buren Lab before we went off to war. Yes, we all knew of someone who made the ultimate sacrifice. For the rest of us, we came home and found the community just as we had left it. And that's where our story begins. Standing on the Grand Avenue Bridge in the late 40s and early 50s, this was the view of the northeast riverbank. The area was a hodgepodge of buildings. Again, using this 1999 view as a reference point, this is pretty much how the street side of the East Riverbank still appeared after the war. This picture was taken on a Sunday, when most businesses were closed. The area included restaurants, taverns, a bakery, a furniture store, photo studio, the Witter Hotel, a beauty parlor, a plumbing shop, the Eagles Club, and various other tenants that changed from time to time. This picture was taken in August of 1951. There was still no Jackson Street Bridge. Our east side downtown was still a beehive of activity, and as yet there were no parking meters. Now let's take a video stroll down the sidewalk and get a feel for what it was really like on that fine August day in 1951. This popcorn wagon was a regular summer fixture in the 50s. The aroma of that freshly popped corn was irresistible as it permeated the area. And speaking of aromas, when you entered this little shoeshine shop operated by Shorty the Greek, it had an aroma all of its own, a mixture of leather, shoe polish, and hat cleaning solutions. The next building was vacant at the time, but right next to it was Penny Mike's, where Mike Geigen operated a candy and novelty store for many years. He sold lots of penny candy and bubble gum, and for kids on their way to the Saturday Cowboy Show at the nearby Rapids Theater, a stop at Penny Mike's was almost a ritual. Next was a small cafe, and Lisi's second-hand store occupied the next two buildings. Just beyond that point was a large vacant area where the Rapids Furniture Store, which was destroyed by fire just 1 year earlier, once stood. The next building was Herschel's Bakery, and just beyond the bakery was the Witter Hotel complex, which included a restaurant, a barber shop, the hotel, a beauty parlor, and a tavern. It was during this period when, with the Great War behind us, folks were caught up in the 1948 presidential election, and an exuberant Harry Truman mocked the skeptics who said it couldn't be done. From the north end of First Street, we can best appreciate the location using this 1999 view as we again dissolve back to 1951. As from the previous view, the Witter Hotel is visible on the curve in the distance. The building with the Miller beer advertisement was the Eagles Club, and on the extreme right side of the picture is the remnant of a gas station. Long-range plans called for the gradual removal of the East Riverbank buildings from approximately the 1st and Oak Street intersection to the junction of 1st and Baker Streets. One of the last buildings to go was the Witter Hotel. Close-in detail shows the Witter name in stained glass over the entrance to the hotel, just one of many reminders of a period when the Witter was built. Consolidated Papers eventually bought the hotel, made some minor improvements to the building, and operated it until the summer of 1951, when the beautiful new Mead Hotel on East Grand Avenue was opened for business. An interesting side note, the Wisconsin Rapids Rotary Club was the last group to meet and be served at the Witter, and the first group to meet and be served at the new Mead Hotel. Here we see the Rotarians at their first meeting at the Mead on June 27, 1951, 5 days before the new hotel was officially opened to the public. Also following the war, the Wood County Courthouse, which had been built in 1861 and faced Baker Street, was still in use. Many of us received our induction papers from this building. The new present-day courthouse facing Market Street was built in 1955 and is located on the same property as the old 1861 courthouse. The new courthouse was somewhat of a symbol of progress when just 1 year later, in August of 1956, the county celebrated its centennial. This was the official Centennial logo, and a week-long countywide program was outlined in this historical program book. Elaborate entertainment was planned, and the book listed committees for every conceivable event. A queen and her court of 10 were selected out of 47 contestants from all over Wood County. The book was filled with historical photos covering moments frozen in time over the past 100 years. Advertisers gladly offered support and were a proud part of this historical publication. After all, such an event wouldn't happen again until the year 2056, when no doubt a copy of the old book will be resurrected for a link with the past. Looking south from the courthouse area, we again go back in time. This is how 2nd Street appeared as late as 1967, showing Bubbles Bar and the rear of the Labor Temple at the intersection of 2nd and Jackson Streets. Further south on 2nd Street was the Badger Bar, located just behind the Flatiron Building, which at the time was occupied by Wisconsin Rapids Savings and Loan, now known as Key Savings Bank. The Badger Bar building was later removed to make room for a drive-up window for the current occupant, Members Advantage Credit Union. From 1999, we dissolve back to this 1965 view, showing the last of the Riverbank properties north of Grand Avenue. Furthest from the camera was a ladies' dress shop, the Sugar Bowl restaurant, a shoe store, Gamble's, J.C. Penney, and Daly's Drug and Jewelry store. 14 years later, all of these buildings were removed to make room for the Veterans Park as we know it today. Notice the balcony area on the 2nd floor of the Daly building, because it was in that same year, 1965, when I took this view from that very balcony. The stone building in the immediate foreground was a public restroom, beyond which all of the Riverbank buildings had now been removed and the area was now a park. The distant building in the center of the screen was the Labor Temple. The open area between the Labor Temple and the large brick building on the right ran all the way through to 2nd Street and was the location of a gas station, Bushnell's One Stop. Certainly a very accessible location. The property is better shown in this street-level view. Remember, this is a 1955 view, and the location is exactly where Jackson Street runs today. In fact, the first building on the right side of the Bushnell property is Staub's Electric Shop, which is still in business at that location. Now let's go back and take up the matter of the first Jackson Street Bridge. The bridge was built in 1957, and finally the traffic congestion on the Grand Avenue Bridge was relieved. Construction was started on the east side of the river and proceeded west on this temporary roadway. The design called for extensive modification of the entrance that serves Consolidated Papers, of which this beautiful bridge was once a part. Once the new Jackson Street Bridge was in place, development of the East Side Park got underway. In the spring of 1965, then Governor Knowles was on hand for the planting of a hopa tree. This is how the area appeared in 1966. When the new Jackson Street Bridge was in place, the Bushnell Station was removed, and a newly remodeled Labor Temple enhanced the area. From this same vantage point, just across the 2nd Street, was a record shop and newsstand. Next was Michael's Cocktail Lounge, the VFW Bar, the Rapids Furniture Store, and Andy Schill's Chrysler Plymouth Garage. Also from this vantage point, the north side of Oak Street looked exactly like this in 1966. Bender's Law Office occupied the corner building. Next was Barnett's Beauty Shop, a tavern, and the furthest building was Hine Printing, the building now occupied by Paul Gross Jewelers. Out of sight just behind the jewelry store, a house-like building was home to Worrell's Meat Market. The structure still stands at the corner location and has since been converted to offices. Further in the distance, just across 3rd Street intersection, you can see a sign that says Cars. Good reason, and here's why. First, here's a 1999 view to help identify the area, which is now occupied by the Wood County Bank. Until 1967, it was home to Hammersbach Ford. A sign in the window tells us that they had just moved to their new location on West Grand Avenue. Just to the right of the Hammersbach building on Oak Street, a very historic-looking building was the old Grand Army of the Republic Hall. The group was organized in 1881 with 27 charter members, and while the GAR flourished for a while, records show that by 1923 there were only 15 members, and the organization eventually dissolved. All of these buildings were demolished when the bank took over the property. Each fall, even before the war, the city hosted a cranberry festival. Originally a one-day affair, by the 1950s it had taken on the name of National Cranberry and had evolved into a 3-day celebration. The 1953 Cranberry brought more than 30,000 people to the community, and over 25,000 free cranberry pies were served. Parade floats and marching bands came from all over the state, sponsored locally and by well-known names like Oscar Mayer, Major Milwaukee Breweries, and countless others. The parade always climaxed the 3-day event. It started on the west side of the river, crossed over the bridge, turned north on 2nd Street, and broke up in the area of the courthouse. As one might expect, there was always a Cranberry Queen and her court. This was the Queen's Float for 1953, sponsored by the Area Chamber of Commerce. The 1953 Queen was Sis Palmatier. The National Cranberry was discontinued when it was no longer possible to get the number of volunteers and sponsors needed to continue the event. Certainly an unfortunate circumstance for the community. Up until the early 50s, the Wood County Telephone Company was located in this building at 230 2nd Street South. It wasn't until 1957 that the locally owned telephone company moved to their present location on East Grand Avenue. At the time, when you picked up the phone, a polite operator would say, "Number, please," to which the caller would respond. It was just 1 year later, in 1958, that the dial system went into service. In those days, the first 2 digits of the exchange numbers were abbreviations of names. For example, instead of 423, it was Harrison or HA3 for Wisconsin Rapids. For Port Edwards and Nakusa, the number were preceded by Tuxedo or TU6 or TU7. The old phone book had 160 pages of residential business phone numbers and information, compared to the current book of just over 400 pages. Today's Wood County Telephone Company could more correctly be referred to as a telecommunications firm, in lieu of the many services that are now made available through the company. In the late 40s, Chrysler began making a line of cars with real wood and steel bodies, which they called the Town and Country Series. They were offered as a convertible or as 2- and 4-door sedans. These beautiful cars were very expensive at the time, selling for around $3,000. Today they are much sought after by collectors worldwide. This convertible, owned by Phil and Mary Brown of Wisconsin Rapids, is one of just 35 like it that are known to exist. It was an official part of the 1998 Rose Bowl Parade, in which Carol Burnett rode as Grand Marshal of the parade. This was Chrysler's final offering in 1948, the last year that the true classic Chrysler Woodies were manufactured. In 1968, there was no such thing as videotape, let alone a camcorder. And I was yearning to record not just the picture on film, I wanted to record the sound as well. In desperation, I built myself a sound unit and installed it in a modified 16mm movie camera. In fact, this is a picture of one I had built many years earlier in 1947, before the age of the transistor. And while it worked well, it proved to be much too bulky. After much experimentation, the opportunity to use my newest version was not long in coming. In March of 1968, when Richard Nixon was running for president against Hubert Humphrey, Nixon and his wife Pat came to Wisconsin Rapids, where he delivered a campaign speech at the newly remodeled Labor Temple.
I'll take him along and have him introduce me every place. That was certainly, certainly we do appreciate this wonderful crowd that is here. A very outstanding dinner. I remember a great crowd, and so naturally I had to demonstrate the fact that I wasn't afraid to eat cranberries. What happened in New Hampshire is probably one of the most exciting stories. They want to talk. They want to express to the nation their own feeling of frustration about what's going on in Washington and the need for new leadership. Now, what does all this add up to? I want to tell you what it adds up to. New Hampshire, I think, is typical of the nation in this respect. It also adds up to what can happen in Wisconsin and in other primary states. What I have sensed as I've traveled all over this country over the past few weeks, beginning on February the 1st when I became a candidate, what I have sensed not only in New Hampshire, but in Wisconsin, in Colorado, in Indiana, in Virginia, in Texas, in Oklahoma, why is it? What is the reason for this coalition? Why are the independents joining us? Why are the Democrats joining us? Why is it that I can be so confident about what is going to happen? I'll tell you that is because there is a great cause. And by a cause, I am not referring to simply the usual cause that gets people excited in an election, and, you know, the usual one, they're in and we're out. Let's get them out so we can be in. And that was the theme that I hit upon in all of my speeches in New Hampshire that I have used and will continue to use here in Wisconsin and across this nation. America needs new leadership.
The rest is history. Nixon went on to win the election and serve the country well until during his second term in office, when he resigned as a result of the Watergate scandal. Just as before the war, labor played a major role in the progress of our country and community. For the unions, fall was a time to celebrate with a traditional Labor Day picnic at Robinson Park. Rides, dancing, entertainment, food, drink, and fireworks were all a part of the fun-filled three-day celebration. Somehow, like the National Cranberry and our 4th of July parades, all of this has fallen by the wayside. The winter of 67 and 68 was very wicked. This was the scene on downtown Oak Street as folks began to head home to avoid being snowed in. And while it was a headache for most of us, the little ones enjoyed the snow immensely. And of course, with a wild winter, spring flooding was inevitable, as in 1968 when the Wisconsin River unleashed its fury. It was during that same period in the 60s when thousands of small groups of young folks all over the country were trying to emulate their idols, Elvis Presley and the Beatles. Locally, many of our youth got together musical groups to compete in contests. I was lucky enough to capture one such group on film. They called themselves the Shags, and at the time were made up of Mike Bonertz, Mark Benson, Francis Shaka, and Mike Thompson. And this is their version of a tune they called the Jolly Green Giant. Ladies and gentlemen, the Shags.
In the valley of the Jolly, oh, you heard about the Jolly Green Giant. Well, he's so big and mean. can of beans. He lives down in his valley. The cat stays tall and green. He ain't no prize, 'cause there's no women his size, and that's why the cat's so mean. One day he left his valley pad. I mean to say, this cat was mad. Now looking round, he wasn't gone long, and then he ran into an Amazon with his change his whole complexion. He had never seen such beautiful sight. He looked at her, and she looked at him, and she almost passed out from fright. He looked at her, thought, what a diller. He touched her once, she slapped him silly. Now this was something he had never seen. He looked at her, and she commenced. Now listen, pal, this ain't no fluke. I can't see going with a big green coat. Well, you heard about the Charlie Green shine. Don't let his troubles cross your mind. He couldn't get salad, so went back to his valley. The kid was colorblind.
In the summer of 1966, the city had an unusual guest when the Goodyear blimp paid us a visit. The airship was moored at Wausau as part of a Goodyear tire promotion. Meanwhile, down at Baraboo, the Circus World Museum was loading their beautiful wagons on special railroad cars for the annual trip to Milwaukee and the great 4th of July parade. But here at home, in the 60s, we still had our own 4th of July parades. Also in the 60s, the city could boast of a modern new swimming pool that replaced the large river water pool that had served the city well for so many years. Looking back, the late 60s were certainly happy years. On the West Coast, Walt Disney's Disneyland was breaking attendance records. Jack Benny's Maxwell was proudly displayed as one of the attractions at a flourishing Universal Studios. And at Long Beach, the Queen Mary was being converted into a convention center. People all over the country were generally upbeat. Looking back, it was a great time to be alive, and except for the Vietnam War, a time that was certainly appreciated by all of Tom Brokaw's greatest generation. I hope you've enjoyed this latest version of the history of Wisconsin Rapids, and I look forward to bringing you my next presentation, After the War, Part 3, Our Recent Past. Oh, and thanks for listening.
Seeing this program, would you like to invest in your heritage? For just $5 a year, you're invited to become a member of the Southwood County Historical Corporation. Your contribution assures continuing research and preservation of our past.